My name's Melissa Carter, 32 years old, CEO of Carter Tech, a billion-dollar software empire my father built from the ground up. I was the woman people whispered about in boardrooms, confident, cold, and impossible to impress. At least, that's what everyone thought. Then came Ethan, the new cook at our corporate cafeteria. He wasn't like the suits that surrounded me daily. He smiled too much, talked too freely, and had the nerve to tease me about burning toast during a charity breakfast event. One afternoon, I found myself in the company kitchen, hiding from yet another board meeting. Ethan was there, humming, making something that smelled like heaven itself. He offered me a plate. "I don't usually serve CEOs," he joked, "but you look like you need comfort food more than anyone." And that moment, it was the first genuine smile I'd had in months. I didn't know it yet, but my life, my perfect, controlled corporate life, was about to become a whole lot messier. For the next few weeks, I found excuses to check in at the cafeteria. A CEO had no business lingering around the kitchen, but there I was, every morning, pretending to inspect food quality while Ethan cooked like he was born for it. He had this effortless charm, teasing, lighthearted, but never disrespectful. One morning, as he poured me coffee, he said, "You know, for someone who looks like she owns the world, you always seem tired of it." I froze. No one ever talked to me like that. Not my employees, not my so-called friends, not even my family. Ethan didn't wait for my answer. He just smiled, slid a plate of pancakes toward me, and said, "Eat, the world can wait until you've had breakfast." It became our ritual. Every day at 8:15 a.m., he'd save me a plate, my CEO special, he called it. Some mornings we'd talk about food, other times about life. He told me he once dreamed of opening a small bakery with his mom before she passed away. I told him nothing, really. I wasn't used to opening up, but I listened. And for the first time, someone saw Melissa the woman, not Melissa the CEO. Of course, my family noticed the change, and when my mother saw me smiling at my phone one night, she asked the question that would set everything on fire. "Who's making you smile like that, darling? It better not be someone beneath your station." My mother had that tone, the kind that could slice through diamonds and dignity at once. I tried to brush it off, but of course, she didn't let it go. 2 nights later, my parents hosted a small family dinner. That phrase was code for an ambush with champagne. As I walked into the dining hall, there he was, Daniel Wright, my father's business partner's son. Polished, Harvard smile, Rolex confidence, everything that looked perfect on paper and completely wrong in my heart. "Melissa," my father began, "Daniel has just returned from London. He's starting a new project with Wright Industries. You two should reconnect, maybe dinner this weekend." I forced a polite smile. "I appreciate it, Dad, but I already have plans." My mother's eyes narrowed. "With who?" I hesitated, 1 second too long. Her expression turned sharp. "You're not seriously seeing that cook, are you?" The room went silent. Even the clink of silverware stopped. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. "A cook, that's charming." I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Every fiber of my upbringing told me to stay composed, to laugh it off. But instead, I said, "Yes, a cook, and he's more of a man than most people in this room." Then I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out, heels clicking like thunder against marble floors. I didn't even realize I was crying until I reached the parking lot. And the first person I called wasn't my assistant. It was Ethan. "Rough night?" he asked softly. "You have no idea," I whispered. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "Come by the kitchen tomorrow morning. I'll make something that fixes everything." And for once, I believed him. The next morning, I walked into the cafeteria earlier than usual, no makeup, no heels, just me. Ethan was already there, sleeves rolled up, whisk in hand, the morning sunlight catching in his hair. He looked up and smiled like he'd been expecting me. "You look like someone who's had a long night," he said. "You could say that," I sighed, sitting at the counter. My parents basically staged a corporate intervention over my love life. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, they want you to marry a man who owns a yacht and a family crest. I couldn't help but laugh. You forgot the part where he's dull and says, synergy, like it's a personality trait. He grinned, setting a plate in front of me, pancakes shaped like a heart. Then eat. You can't fight a boardroom war on an empty stomach. I laughed again, real laughter this time, and when our eyes met, something shifted. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was want. It was connection. Ethan, I said softly, you do realize my parents would implode if they knew I was here right now. Then don't tell them, he said, his voice calm but steady. Let this just be ours. He reached out, brushing a stray hair behind my ear. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. Melissa, he murmured, you deserve someone who sees you, not your father's company. I didn't plan to kiss him, but I did. And when I pulled back, breathless, he whispered with a smile. Guess I'm in trouble now, huh? I smiled back. You have no idea. Because by the next morning, the paparazzi had photos of us. I woke up to a flurry of notifications. My phone was blowing up, text after text, email after email, all with one thing in common. CEO Melissa Carter caught kissing mystery man. The photos were everywhere. Me and Ethan, in the company cafeteria, mid-kiss, frozen in golden morning light like a scene from a romance movie. My assistant, Julia, called first. Melissa, the PR team is panicking. Your father's already called 3 times. Do you want me to release a statement? I sighed, rubbing my temples. No statement, not yet. Before I could hang up, another call came in. My father. Melissa, my office now. When I arrived, both my parents were there, mother fuming, father packing. The silence was sharp until my mother slammed a magazine on the desk. On the cover, the CEO and the cook, corporate royalty falls for commoner. You've humiliated this family, she hissed. By kissing someone I care about, I shot back. My father's tone was cold. You think you can run this company and play house with a cafeteria worker. The board won't respect you. You'll lose everything. That stung. I loved my job. I had fought tooth and nail for it. But the thought of losing Ethan, that hurt worse. If that's what it costs to be happy, I said quietly, then maybe it's worth it. My mother's jaw dropped. My father turned away. We'll discuss this after the press conference, he muttered. And for God's sake, stay away from him. But of course, I didn't. That night, I went to Ethan's small apartment above a bakery on 5th Street. He opened the door, still in his apron, eyes wide. You came, he said softly. You didn't think a little scandal would scare me off, did you? He smiled, relieved, and pulled me in. The world could keep its headlines. I had found something real, and no headline could take that away. The next morning, Ethan made breakfast like nothing had changed, except everything had. We were headline news, the internet's latest forbidden romance. As I sat on his counter in my wrinkled dress shirt, he flipped toast that was already half burnt and said, You know, I've never dated someone who had a stock ticker attached to their name. I grinned, and I've never dated someone who still uses a pan older than me. He threw me a mock glare, and we both laughed, the kind of laughter that makes everything else fade away. But my phone didn't stop buzzing. There were messages from Julia, from the board, from my father's assistant. One from my mother simply said, Melissa, fix this before you destroy us. I felt that familiar pull, the guilt, the pressure, the expectations of being a Carter. Ethan noticed my silence. You're thinking about leaving, aren't you? I looked at him. No, I'm thinking about how to keep both worlds from collapsing. He set the spatula down, walked over, and gently tilted my chin up. You don't have to fix the world, Melissa. Just find the part of it that makes you happy and hold on. Those words melted something in me. But before I could reply, my phone buzzed again, this time, a message that made my stomach drop. Board meeting MOVED 2, 11 a.m. Agenda. Leadership stability discussion. They were questioning my position as CEO. "They're coming for my seat," I whispered. "Then sit taller," Ethan said simply. It was the most powerful thing anyone had ever said to me. That day, I walked into the boardroom in a white suit, calm, fierce, and unapologetic. And when they brought up the scandal, I didn't flinch. If you're worried about who I love more, my company or a good man, you should know I've never failed either. The silence that followed was deafening. I won that meeting, barely, but I knew it was only the beginning of the war. Because love wasn't my biggest challenge, my family was. 2 weeks after the board meeting, things seemed calm, too calm. I should have known that when my mother invited me to a small family dinner to clear the air. It was a setup. When I arrived at the Carter estate, the atmosphere was thick with tension and the scent of expensive lies. My father greeted me with forced warmth. My mother wore that smile she used when photographers were around. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Ethan. Standing in the dining room, awkward and completely out of place in his simple shirt, talking politely to a butler. My heart dropped. "What is he doing here?" I whispered. My mother's voice was sugar and venom. "We thought it would be enlightening to meet the man who's turned our daughter into a tabloid joke." I shot her a look that could burn glass. "You had no right to." But she ignored me, turning her gaze toward Ethan. "Tell me, Mr. Cook, do you honestly believe you can provide for a woman like Melissa? She was raised on standards you can't even pronounce." Ethan stayed calm. He looked straight at her and said, "I don't need to provide her wealth, ma'am. She already has that. I'm just here to give her peace." The room went dead silent. Even my father paused mid-sip. My mother laughed, brittle and sharp. "Peace doesn't pay for penthouses, dear." That's when I snapped. "Enough. You don't get to humiliate him because he doesn't come with a title or a trust fund." I turned to Ethan. "Let's go." He hesitated, then nodded. As we left, my mother said one last thing, her voice low and cold. "If you walk out that door, Melissa, you walk away from everything your family built." I stopped, heart pounding, and said over my shoulder, "Then maybe it's time I build something of my own." Outside, under the warm night sky, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," I said. And as we drove away, I didn't realize that this night, the night I finally chose love, was the same night my father began plotting my replacement. 3 days after the dinner disaster, the storm hit. I was in my office, halfway through a strategy meeting, when Julia burst in, pale as paper. "Melissa, your father just called an emergency board session. Without you." My stomach turned to ice. "Without me?" She nodded. "And he's bringing in Daniel Wright." Of course, Daniel Wright, the golden boy, the man my parents wanted me to marry. It didn't take a genius to see what was happening. My father was staging a corporate coup, and Daniel was his pawn. By the time I got to the boardroom, they were already halfway through the vote. My father looked calm. Daniel was smiling like a vulture in a silk suit. "We appreciate your passion, Melissa," my father began smoothly, "but recent distractions have affected public perception. The board believes it's time for fresh leadership." I glared at him. "You mean controllable leadership?" He didn't deny it. "We're not firing you," Daniel added smugly. "Just asking you to take a temporary leave for optics." Optics, the word burned. I looked around the table. The same men and women who'd once cheered my success, now avoiding my eyes. "You all know I built Carter Tech into what it is today," I said, voice steady. "If this is about my personal life, say it plainly." Daniel smirked. "It's about your judgment. Dating a cafeteria worker doesn't inspire investor confidence." I stood slowly, hands trembling with anger. "You can take my title, but you can't take what I built. And trust me, when this company falls apart under your so-called leadership, don't call me to fix it." Then I walked out head high, heart breaking. When I reached the parking lot, Ethan was waiting for me, leaning against his old car, eyes full of concern. "Bad day?" he asked softly. I laughed bitterly. "You could say I just lost everything." He shook his head, took my hand and said, "No, Melissa, you just lost the cage they built for you." And right there, under the fatting city light, I realized maybe losing everything was how I'd finally start living. The next morning, I woke up in Ethan's small apartment. No silk sheets, no skyline view, just the faint smell of bread baking and sunlight streaming through worn curtains. It felt peaceful. I hadn't felt peace in years. Ethan was already in the kitchen, dusted in flour, humming to himself. "You're up early for someone who just quit being rich," he teased. I smiled. Correction, I didn't quit being rich. I got fired from being miserable. He laughed, sliding a plate of warm croissants my way. "Then congratulations, you're free." Those words hit deeper than I expected. Free. For the next few weeks, life was simple. I helped Ethan in the bakery he'd always dreamed of opening. I burned more loaves than I baked, but I loved it. We laughed until our sides hurt, danced in flour-dusted kitchens, and for the first time in my adult life, I stopped checking my phone. One afternoon, as we were closing shop, Ethan said quietly, "You know, we could make this official, start a real business together." I blinked. "You mean like partners?" He grinned. "In business and maybe something else too." Before I could reply, the doorbell jingled. Standing there, looking wildly out of place among the scent of pastries and sugar, was Julia, my old assistant. She rushed in, clutching a file. "Melissa, you need to see this." Inside were financial statements, unusual transfers, board decisions, and one headline that made my blood run cold. Carter Tech announces merger with Wright Industries. CEO Daniel Wright to lead new division. My father had done it. He sold half the company, the one my mother, my late grandfather, and I had built, to the very man who tried to replace me. I stared at the paper, shaking. They're destroying everything. Ethan stepped beside me, hand on my shoulder. "Then let's build something better." His eyes weren't just steady, they were full of belief. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the CEO anymore. I was something more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose, and someone worth fighting for. 2 weeks later, my kitchen table was covered in plans, receipts, and sketches, not for code or corporate expansion charts, but for something new. Heart and Hearth, the name Ethan came up with for our bakery and cafe startup. "It's cozy, it's warm," he said, tapping the napkin where he'd scribbled it, "and it sounds like what you've been missing." I smiled, a place that feeds both the body and the soul. We pooled what little savings we had. I sold my penthouse, my luxury car, even my designer wardrobe. My old colleagues probably thought I'd lost my mind. But I'd never felt so alive. Opening day was chaos, flour on the floor, overbaked muffins, a jammed espresso machine, and yet customers kept coming. They loved it, the laughter, the warmth, the realness. And thanks to a few local reporters who recognized me, the story spread fast. Ex-CEO trades corporate throne for bakery apron and finds happiness. We went viral overnight. Heart and Hearth became the symbol of something people secretly longed, for simplicity with heart. But just as everything started to bloom, my past came knocking again. One evening, as Ethan and I were closing up, a black car pulled up outside. My father stepped out, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. "Melissa," he said, scanning the cafe, "you've made quite the spectacle." I crossed my arms. "Nice to see you too, Dad." He didn't sit, didn't smile. "Daniel's merger is falling apart. Investors are pulling out. We need your name, your credibility, to stabilize the company." I blinked. "You kicked me out, remember?" "I was protecting the brand," he said stiffly. "Now I'm asking for your help. The family business is at stake." Ethan stayed silent, letting me choose. For a moment, old instincts tugged at me, the part that wanted to fix things, to prove myself. But then I looked around. The smell of cinnamon, the sound of laughter from the kitchen, the home I'd built my way. "No, Dad," I said softly. "The family business isn't dying, it just moved here." His jaw tightened. "You're throwing away a legacy." "No," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm creating one." He left without another word. That night, Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "So, what's next, boss?" I laughed. "Next, we expand. Maybe open another Heart and Hearth, and maybe plan something else too." He raised an eyebrow. "Something else?" I smiled mischievously. "Like a wedding." His spatula clattered to the floor. A few months later, Heart and Hearth was thriving. People lined up around the block for our pastries, and we had hired a small but loyal team. Life felt perfect, messy, warm, and ours. Ethan, of course, couldn't resist teasing me every morning. "You know, CEO of the bakery, CFO of our love life, and soon-to-be CFO of the universe." I laughed, stirring my coffee. "Don't get ahead of yourself." But one crisp autumn morning, he did. He got down on one knee right there, in the middle of the bustling cafe, flour on his apron, a small velvet box in hand. "Melissa Carter," he said, voice trembling just enough to make my heart flutter. "I don't need a boardroom, I don't need your penthouse. All I need is you. Will you marry me?" The entire cafe erupted in cheers. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the coffee. "Of course," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. We hugged, spinning in the middle of the chaos. Customers clapped, staff cheered, and for the first time I didn't care what anyone thought. Afterward, as we cleaned up, Ethan leaned close and murmured, "3 kids, right? 2 boys, 1 little girl." I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, chef." But deep down, I already pictured our future. Laughter echoing through a warm home, tiny hands covered in flour, and love that refused to be measured by status or wealth. A year later, our wedding was small, cozy, and perfect. Heart and Hearth served the catering, of course. Friends, loyal customers, and a few board members who had stuck by me watched as Ethan and I exchanged vows. "I promise to love you," I whispered, "through burnt toast, corporate chaos, and everything in between." "And I promise to always make you pancakes," Ethan replied, grinning, "even if you're CEO, eating the world while I'm frying eggs." Life after marriage was chaotic, but joyful. 2 years later, our first son, Leo, arrived. He had Ethan's dimples and my stubborn streak. A year after that, our second son, Max, joined the family. And finally, 3 years after Leo's birth, our little girl, Ella, completed our family. The house was never quiet, toys in the kitchen, laughter echoing off walls, flour on every surface, but it was home. One evening, as I watched Ethan juggle spaghetti and entertain the kids, I realized how far we had come. The woman my family wanted to mold into a boardroom robot had chosen love. The man I had met as a simple cook had built a life full of warmth, laughter, and chaos with me. I laughed when Leo tried to pour chocolate syrup on Max, and Ethan caught Ella mid-step with a spoon of flour. "Chaos," Ethan said, wiping his hands, "is our legacy now." "Better than any boardroom," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. And in that moment, surrounded by noise, love, and mess, I knew I wouldn't trade it for all the wealth in the world. Life wasn't always easy. As much as I loved my family, running Heart and Hearth while raising 3 kids tested every ounce of patience and resilience I had. One particularly rainy week, the bakery faced a power outage during peak hours. Orders piled up, Leo got sick, and Ella had a minor fall from the couch. I was exhausted, covered in flour and chocolate syrup, and felt like I was failing at everything at once. Ethan saw me on the kitchen floor, holding Max, hair damp from rain, and whispered, "Hey, look at me. You are doing this. You're amazing." I laughed, tears running down my cheeks. "Amazing. I can't even find the whisk." He took my hand. "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be here." That night, as we tucked the kids into bed, I realized that strength didn't mean doing everything alone. It meant letting someone love you, letting someone stand with you through chaos, and still finding joy in the mess. I had survived corporate betrayal, scandal, and my family's disapproval. And now, the storms of everyday life were no match for the life we had built together. Tomorrow, Ethan said, kissing my forehead, we start fresh, together. Together, I agreed, finally feeling like I could breathe. By the time our children were old enough to start school, Heart and Hearth had expanded into 2 new locations. Our little bakery had grown into a community hub, a place where people didn't just come for the food, but for the warmth, laughter, and love that Ethan and I poured into everything we did. One sunny afternoon, we hosted a family day at the bakery. Kids ran around with painted faces, customers joined in on impromptu games, and Ethan and I found a quiet moment in the back, watching Leo and Max squabble over who got the last cookie while Ella toddled around giggling. "Remember when this was just a dream?" I asked, leaning against him. "I do," he said, smiling. "And now, look at us. Chaos, flower, love, and 3 little humans." I laughed. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even my parents had softened over the years. My father admitted once, over coffee, "I underestimated him, and you were right." And while my mother still fussed over me, it was gentler now, a mixture of pride and grudging respect. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, I realized how far we'd come. From boardroom battles and scandal to pancakes and bedtime stories, we had built something far richer than any company could offer. A family bound by love, laughter, and unwavering support. "Good night, Mommy," Leo whispered. "Sweet dreams, my loves," I replied, heart full. Ethan wrapped an arm around me, ready for our next adventure. "Always," I smiled, knowing that with him, life would always be deliciously unpredictable. The years that followed were full of little miracles and big joys. Heart and Hearth became more than just a bakery. It became a symbol of love, resilience, and second chances. Leo and Max grew into energetic, mischievous boys, always eager to help in the kitchen. Ella, our little princess, brought laughter and light wherever she went. Ethan and I reveled in the chaos, flower fights, and bedtime stories that became the soundtrack of our lives. One quiet evening, after the kids had fallen asleep, Ethan and I sat on the porch, holding hands. The soft glow of the bakery lights in the distance reflected in his eyes. "Melissa," he said softly, "we did it. Against all odds, we built this life together." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "We did, and we'll keep building, one messy, beautiful day at a time." As the cool night breeze wrapped around us, I realized how far love could take you, beyond family pressure, corporate power plays, and every obstacle life threw your way. Our story wasn't perfect. It was filled with drama, heartbreak, and chaos, but it was ours. 3 kids, 2 hearts, and 1 bakery later, I finally understood. Love wasn't about status, wealth, or approval. It was about finding someone who made your world warmer, brighter, and full of laughter, even in the messiest moments. Ethan kissed my forehead. "Forever, right?" "Forever," I whispered back, smiling, "and then some." And with that, we watched our children play under the golden sunset, the smell of fresh bread wafting from the bakery, and knew this was exactly where we were meant to be. The end.